All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm very excited that you all want to be a part of this. And it's just really good to be with you in person and online, because really the only way I usually communicate to you is via email. So this is a very nice treat for me, and I'm so excited. I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to thank my colleagues, Jeremy Puckett and Caroline Manny. Without these guys, I wouldn't be up here. There's just no way. They're my support crew, and I really do appreciate them. And I want to give Caroline just a few minutes. We've got some new things here in the library, and I want her to let you know about them.
Hi. I'll talk about a couple of new things that are in the physical library and a couple of things that will be in the online library. So we have a little something for the people who teach on campus and the people who teach off campus. In the library, some new things to be aware of are we have a technology lending library now that is fully up and operational. We kind of had a soft start with it last semester, but it's fully up now. In the technology lending library, your students can borrow a video camera, an iPad, the webcam that we're using right now. The iPad and the video camera both can be mounted on a tripod for recording. Those tools would be great for students to prepare presentations or to film, for example, when they're doing field work and things like that. So be aware of that. They can also check out a laptop and a projector and rent one of the study rooms so that they can practice their presentations. So you may want to encourage your students when they have to give a presentation to class to come to the library and use our tools to practice for it, first of all. So that's our technology lending library. Obviously, you guys can borrow those tools too. So if you need something during your class to film your class presentations, maybe you want to film those as a learning artifact, then you can check out the camera. If you need, we've had a couple of professors testing last semester, check out of a microphone that we have that they can connect to the computer so that they can record their lecture and then turn around and put that lecture in their online class. So, or make that lecture available for students who missed for whatever reason. So if you would like to check out anything from our technology lending library, feel free. We also have, or will have by the beginning of the semester, a Creative Commons where the students will be able to, it's going to be a room where we will have equipment and resources for the students to do their creative work, like make their posters for their poster presentations, or visual aids for any other type of presentation, those types of things. So encourage your students to use that facility. We want you to be aware inside the library, we have returned to purchasing new academic titles for all of our disciplines. And to make them more prominent, we're putting them over here. And they, rather than being organized by Dewey Decimal when they're over here, they're organized by subject area, just to try to get the students more familiar with the fact that we do have books for them to use as resources too. So, and we'd like you guys to be aware of looking at those and the possibility of suggesting to us when there's a title that you think is new and appropriate for your discipline. We definitely want to hear about it. We have popular fiction over here, and that's almost always 100% new. So because we order that monthly and they're new titles. So if you're on campus in between classes and you have some downtime, come enjoy a book. We also now have popular videos, movies, for the students, but also for faculty. So if you're regularly on campus and you'd like to check out a video, they are 7-day rentals. Feel free. For online folks, we have a new website, and we'll have a whole session on that new website. library website, so I won't spoil myself too much with that. But I also want to remind anybody here or anybody who teaches online that the librarians here are available to do information literacy instruction in other words, library instruction, teaching students how to identify an information need, find information, evaluate information, organize information, cite information. We can do that type of instruction for your face-to-face class or for your online class. And if it's an online class, we can do it either as a recorded video that your students can watch anytime, or we can do it as a live webinar meeting, just like we're streaming this. So please be aware of all those library resources and take advantage of them. Did I leave anything out that you wanted me to do? So. I think I got all of it. And I'll be talking to you guys more about the new library website in a bit.
Yeah, so we're making some big changes here in the library, and we're super excited. You know, it's always fun to get boxes in the mail, but it's super fun to get boxes of books in the mail. So we've had a really good couple weeks here getting all these in, and we're pretty excited about it. So I wanted to take you to our center site, and I'm going to show you a place that we are in developing. So for everybody that's streaming, I sent a link and a QR code, and you have that on the program there. If you, I didn't make a whole bunch of handouts. You know, we're trying to be paper friendly here. So if you want to access anything from today, you can go to that link. It will actually land you here in our best practices. I click it. Well, anyway, so when you click on that, you'll see the materials for our thing today. The other one, this was the one that has to, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Okay, the other place we've added is strictly, like, specifically for adjunct faculty. Right now in this, we only have one thing because we're developing it, and y'all are going to actually help me with that today. We have a teaching and learning resource manual there. And it has everything you need to know about grading. It's kind of, it's like an employee handbook, but it's not an employee handbook. We can't use the word handbook here. We have to use the word manual. And so it's just a resource manual for all things teaching and learning. So if you want to check that out, that's fine. And then today during lunch, either on here or in the room, what I'm going to have is we want to fill this page up with things that you will use. Now I can sit here and guess what it is that you all need resource-wise, or you can just tell me and then we'll cut straight to the chase. So I'm going to take suggestions from you. I would love to have as many as possible so that we can build this out for all of our adjuncts now and in the future, so that we can provide you all the best support that we possibly can and that you need. Okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was our faculty development program in that big thick packet. So one of the things, that has everything that we're going to offer this year, and kind of describes our philosophy and kind of our motivation behind our programming design. One of the things that I'm going to do this year, and you'll be getting an email from me, is after the beginning of each module, I want to have a time where we can sit down and chat with each other. And if anything, to just, if you have any questions, I'm going to be there for you. If you have taught this, your class before, but you want to try something new and you're not sure if it'll work, and you just need somebody to talk to about teaching or learning, you can talk to me about other things, but I'm really more of an expert in teaching and learning. So I have kind of like consultation meetings, and it's voluntary only. We'll schedule a time where we'll meet. We don't have to meet in person. We've got all the technology. We can meet Skype or via Zoom. We've got a new technology conferencing technology coming out called WebEx Teams. But I want to, I'll be sending you all emails. We'll schedule a time. It's not, again, it's not mandatory. It's voluntary. Or if you just want to sit and chat and be like, hey, I thought about what you said and I applied it here and it worked. Just, you know, just there if you all need me. And then everything else is listed. It does tell you like when things are streaming online or whether they're here on campus. If you have any questions, this too will be up on our site at some point. Feel free to ask, but we hope that we have chosen and organized a variety of different flavors. And if you are on campus, I highly recommend that you come to the library. Like I think it's the first Monday of each month. We're going to have like a new display and little reception. Try to get more people in here and appreciate this wonderful building with books that we all work in. Okay. All right. So housekeeping things. For those of you who don't know, restrooms are over here down this hallway. If you keep going straight down the hallway, if you're needing some water or hot water, there's a little mini kitchen in there. There's water jugs, so feel free to fill up anything that you need. And then lunch. Lunch will be here. It's being catered by 3Ps from Frankfurt. For those of you who register dietary restrictions, those were passed along, and she assured me that the boxes will be marked. So if you signed up for a dietary restriction, take the box that you signed up for, and if not, try not to take the box because we don't want any tragedies with allergies. All right, now campus tour. And again, this is completely optional, but I have people on call to give us campus tours if we want to at the end of the day. Do I have anybody planning on staying and doing the campus tour? Okay, it's fine. I just don't want them to come over here unnecessarily. So, all right, cool. All righty, Will, let's learn something. Does that sound good? Okay. I got to have my notes. Don't have this one memorized yet. Okay, so in the world of teaching, if you go back to the historical sense of imparting knowledge from one person to another person, and we're all going to kind of travel back in time to, you know, the kind of land of ancient Greeks where people that knew stuff just verbally explained it to their students, sort of like Euclid, you know, and around the city middle of the fountain, they'd all be in their togas and just imparting knowledge from one thing, one person to the next. And so that was it. That was the strategy. I'm talking to you. I'm telling you. Well, times have changed. And now people like me are saying, hey, use this strategy, use this strategy, use this strategy, use this technology. You can do this too in your classes. And all of a sudden it becomes really overwhelming. Like, how do I select the best method to teach my students? And so what I am straight up is a theoretical nerd. And I really believe that learning theories can drive our decision-making process. And so as a conscientious teacher, we always want to make sure that we are choosing the best method to get our information across to our students. And it's not for lack of advice. Like I said, we are always sending out things and new techniques and active learning, new technology, so that it's out there, but then when it's all in front of you, it's almost like when you're at a beach or on vacation somewhere and you're walking down that beach thing, and you've got our New York City, and there's all these vendors on the side of the road trying to peddle you stuff. And you're like, okay. So what this little talk is going to be about is about how to use learning theories to guide your instructional decision making. And I think the key point here is instructional decision making, is that teaching is an intentional act. Back in the day, when one person was imparting knowledge to another, there was intention there. I'm intending to tell you about Euclid's triangle. And so we are still purveyors of intentional knowledge providing to our students. And with all of the plethora of garb our instructional strategies are out there, how do we select effective ones? There's so many. And so the answer to that question is we have to remain purposeful. Again, teaching is intentional. And we have to base our instructional decisions on the student learning outcomes. Now, the last session of the day, we're really going to dive into exactly what a student learning outcome is and how it's created and what it can do for you. But when making instructional decisions, we always want to view and refer back to that learning objective, because that's our learning goal for that particular course. Okay, I think I'm ready to move on. So the 20th century produced significant strides in teaching and learning theories and how people come to know things. Today I'm going to be presenting 7 discrete theories and discuss with you how they can be applied to your classroom. This was taken from an article from the POD network, and that's a large network of professional development. It was last September, and it was called, I think it's called 7 Ways of Learning. I sent you all the article in an email, and it's also up on the site. Effective teaching based on these ways will be informed first and foremost by your student learning outcomes. And the question that you ask yourself is, what am I trying to teach? What is it that I want my students to be able to do? And that do is really important there. It's not what do I want my students to be able to hear or listen to. It's what do we want them to do. You know, active learning has been proven over and over again that works. It works way better than me standing up here talking to you like I am right now. I am not being an effective teacher. However, that part's coming here in just a minute. All righty. So I think we're ready to get into them. The theories here provide kind of a big picture. They're not a set of instructions. That's one thing you have to understand. All right, it's kind of a big picture and it's kind of a guide, not step by step. All righty. So, in your head, pick a course right now. And you're going to think about a course throughout this whole thing. Now, you can switch courses, because some courses blend towards different theories than others. But throughout this talk that we are going to have, I want you to refer back to the classes that you teach. And I want you to think about what it is you have your students do and what kind of learning occurs to obtain those goals. So, the first way, are your students learning a skill where accuracy, precision, efficiency are all important? How many people teach a class where they have to be accurate, precise, and efficient? Is it based on a routine set of physical or mental operations? So you follow the instructions, pretty straightforward. Can it be broken into steps and performed in a right or best way? So think about a teaching moment in a class where those things are required. These learning outcomes are best served by behavioral learning. Behavioral learning is based on behavioral psychology. You know, the rat, right? It is best learned when tasks are broken into concrete steps and practiced by students with the support of precise and timely feedback. Now, behavioral learning. Feedback is important. He wouldn't have done what he needed to do if he didn't have feedback, right? He wouldn't have gotten to the end of the maze. So in what classes do you teach where you have short, discrete steps and they need immediate feedback before they move on to the next step? Can anybody think of an example and would like to share? Yes, ma'am.
I teach equine rehab and therapy, and my students are learning how to use modalities. So there's TENS, E-STEM, ultrasound, laser, all those they're learning. So we test them on themselves first, and then we also test them on the horses and get feedback.
Yes, yeah, and that is a very procedural step-by-step, and this isn't one where we're creating new ideas. We don't really probably want to create new ideas when we're hooking things up to animals, but so in your instructional moment, if you are doing something where they have to follow steps, behavioral learning is kind of the theory that supports your decision making. And the decisions that you're going to be making are what steps are they going through and how can I get them precise and timely feedback. That feedback element is crucial. And I think sometimes as instructors we fall short because we need to go on to the next step. But we've got to be able to give those people feedback. Okay. All right, so a nursing teacher guides students step by step in developing a skill to insert a tube into the patient nose that goes to the stomach. This is quite delectable first thing in the morning. I'm not even saying that word. This insertion is a basic skill taught in a fundamentals nursing course. How does the teacher use principles of behavioral learning to teach this skill effectively? So how would a teacher go about using behavioral learning to teach this skill effectively? Well, number one, there's a lot of different steps here, correct? So you would break it down by step. And what then is the most important part of using this theoretical approach in your classroom? The feedback. Yeah, we don't want them doing this wrong, I would think. All right. So let's think about another one. Do students need to learn new ideas, new terminology, or useful theories? Do they have to figure out how something functions, or do they need to understand and retain information? Does that sound like something you all have experienced before in your class? You need to learn new ideas, terminology, how something functions. Okay, these learning outcomes are best served by cognitive learning. Cognitive learning is based on the psychology of how people pay attention to, process, and recall information. When instructors use cognitive learning effectively, they get the students' attention, they help them see the overall concepts and connections, and then relate the information that's new to prior information already embedded inside the student's brain. And then they make meaning out of the relationships and the connections between what they knew before and your new information now. Now, in this particular learning theory, if you don't get your students' attention, you're not going to make it through the rest of the steps. So let's think about this really quick. What topics do you all interact with in your courses whereby the students need to figure out how something functions or learn new ideas, new to them ideas? Does anybody think that can provide us with any examples at all? Yes, ma'am.
I'm teaching nursing.
Mm.
And part of one of the assignments is to look at how we use theory and change the process to implement it.
And I will say that anytime you deal with theories, because they're way, way up here, it's really hard to provide students that tangible thing where they understand how that theory works. By connecting it to knowledge that's already there, that will help. That does help. But again, if you don't have their attention, then you can't follow through with the rest of the process. The other thing when using acquiring knowledge or cognitive learning kind of approach in your classroom and reaching that prior knowledge of the student, you can say, hey, we just did this, last week, or you've had this before. But unless they recall that prior knowledge and totally, truly understand it, you're not going to make that connection. And I think there's a lot of times where we as teachers think that prior knowledge is there, and it really isn't. And so therefore they can't connect and they can't move on. So that's something to be thinking about if you're struggling with this type of learning that needs to occur. They need to learn how something functions, or they need to learn the theoretical premises of something, and they're not getting it. The first thing I would do after making sure I have their attention is check their prior knowledge, and that might troubleshoot part of that problems they're having. So a political science teacher uses sports analogies to help students draw on prior knowledge to understand new information. There's a couple of things about that sentence that I like. Number one, what's the topic? Political science. What's the type of examples? Sports. What did they do with that sports? They grabbed their attention. I'm not really sure how attentive somebody would be to political science, but at least by attaching something that they might be, a little attracted to or understand a little better, now we're starting to connect two things. So you don't even have to connect the same subject matter, previous subject matter with the new subject matter. It can be something completely different, kind of like a simile or metaphor. How is the U.S. Constitution like the rules in the game of sports? So you can see how this comparison will be like, oh yeah, this governs the U.S. and this governs the sport. So choosing and selecting prior knowledge and attention-getting topics will kind of pull your students a little bit closer to understanding the material that you're teaching. Okay, number 3. Interesting, I have my notes organized by slide number. But I don't know what number. I'm going to go back and redo this. So we're on learning through inquiry. All right, here we are. So think about a class that you teach. Do your learning goals involve students being aware of and improving their own thinking? Do they need to criticize information, evaluate arguments, evidence, or reason? So my criminal justice people, this is all you all. Does this learning involve creative thinking or appreciate other people's thinking? Learning through inquiry. Do they need to develop critical, creative, and dialogical thinking? Can you think of classes that you teach where this type of learning occurs? So these outcomes are best served by learning through inquiry. Based on theories of critical and creative thinking, classical philosophy such as Socratic questioning, learning through inquiry involves the instructor asking probing questions to model and making the thinking process visible. I want to say that again because this is the key point to making this theory work for you. involves the instructor asking probing questions to model and make the process visible, the thinking process visible. So what is really important here as an instructor using learning through inquiry?
Holding
The types of questions you ask. Yeah. Like if you're not asking the right types of questions and almost forcing your students to dig deeper into the content, then they're not going to be very inquisitive. Okay? So knowing your subject matter is extremely important here because that allows you to ask those types of deep digging questions. So the questioning techniques and the types of questions you ask are really important when you employ learning through inquiry in your classroom. This also requires instructors to be super facilitators and not the sage on the stage, but pushing them so that they're communicating with each other. They're communicating with each other and discussing and learning and, what was the other word? Evaluating and reasoning through dialogue amongst your group. Provide well-targeted facilitation. That's everything, because I think we tend to want to just tell them everything we know rather than letting them inquire and uncover the process. But at this point, this type of teaching, you want to kind of step back and let them. So, an English teacher encourages critical thinking about a text by asking students to respond in writing to a question she poses. After 10 minutes or so, students pass what they've written around to another student who seeks to identify what is powerful or interesting. The papers continue to rotate, and eventually the instructor asks students to share what they regard as the most compelling ideas. She then uses these ideas to build class discussion involving further inquiry about the text. So how is the teacher using learning through inquiry effectively here? What do you see? How is she using it? Yes, sir.
Well, it's kind of like group discussion with my
Mm-hmm.
because it makes them focused on them. They have to interact with them and come up with their own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go on the board. But I'm in the back and letting them do their thing. And that way it's more driven by them, not me sitting in
Right.
front and dictating.
And so what you're able to do is listen to them and then correct the misconceptions before they blow up to a test.
And they have to come to a consensus. And then we put them on the board.
Yeah.
And we make them a little bit off and we discuss what's a little bit off.
That is the epitome of learning through inquiry right there. Does anybody else do similar things in your class?
I kind of stumbled on something in the behavior tourism course. I started to use webinars, so it was really effective. So what this project was, you got a guy, a consultant, come on a webinar, 2%, what he does for the state of Kentucky and evaluating tourism projects for the state. And so that we taught the students before how to ask questions and made them come up with questions. So their questions were so good. They found out that this guy has 99% of all the state contracts for tourism evaluation of economic impact. He's never pitched a report that turns $1 billion. And it's made about $10 million. And near the end of the webinar, this guy and his marketing person just said, "We're not doing this anymore." So that was a straight, he kind of stumbled on it. Of course, I'm doing it again.
Right.
Not this guy, never, it's turned into a turn challenge. So that was the students loved that.
Right.
They actually learned something, the technique that they were well prepared. Number two, asking questions that should be answered by questions. closed, literally, to my knowledge, have never been closed outside
Huh,
of.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
Yeah, having your students going through the inquiry, I think is a huge, it develops the cognitive ability in a big way. So like if you are training, I like to run, and you know, if I run a long distance, you have to train a lot, and the longer you run, the better off you are at the race day. I really think like learning through inquiry does that same thing to your brain, like being able for your students to come up with their own questions through your facilitation is only going to strengthen their cognitive ability, because it's always like, I think that's a skill that's hard. Knowing what questions to ask is a skill that's very hard to, you can't really train that by a set of instructions. It's developed over time. Okay, we are on number 4, mental models. This is it right here. Okay, so again, we're thinking of a class that we teach. Do your students need to learn to solve problems or make decisions? Do your goals involve finding and defining problems, generating solutions, and evaluating and choosing among solutions? So we're cultivating problem solving and decision-making abilities. Do students have to weigh the values of different options and predict outcomes? How many people have something in their class where they have to learn how to do that? Goals such as these are learned best by using mental models. And mental models, when I first read this, you know, when I think of model, I think of a diagram, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You can have a model problem or a model case study. You use case studies in your classroom, then you are learning with mental models, because that case study is providing a model by which they are going to make a decision on their new situation based on their knowledge, their foundational knowledge of your subject matter, and kind of what the model provided them. Mental models was influenced by one of our godfathers of learning, Piaget. And when instructors use this effectively, what you do is you set up appropriate opportunities for practice. Okay? So you can't just expect them to think this way. You have to train them to how to use the model. And I'm thinking of when I was a mathematics teacher for about 20 years. And we would work these algebra problems. I would give examples on the board. And then we'd go through those steps for those examples. And then they get a problem in the homework that wasn't exactly like the examples, and I would get yelled at because I'm giving them homework problems that weren't like the ones that we did on the board. Well, they weren't. They're using kind of the same steps, you know, I'm not breaking, I'm not using totally different rules. You still add 2 integers the same way in this problem as you did that problem, but because it wasn't an exact replica of what they were doing, they were like, this is completely different. So I think the fallout with using mental models is providing that practice opportunity where they can discern the difference between the two, the model and the problem that they're working on, and then apply that knowledge in a new way. And that's when learning really occurs. Learning doesn't occur by regurgitating the 5 steps of order of operation. You know, that's not what happens. Learning occurs when you apply information to a novel situation, a new situation. So that means you really kind of understood when to use it. What else does this say about that? Now, the other thing, and this is so true in mathematics, is that in this model, in generally speaking, students tend to focus on the outcome. What's the answer? What's the answer? They want to get straight to the answer, but they don't necessarily focus on the process of obtaining that answer. And so as a teacher, using these particular things, when you're selecting strategies to get your information across, or have your students, in this case, apply the information that you have taught them, we really need to facilitate and kind of guide them through, not get them straight to the answer. They've got to walk that road themselves. Questioning here is also very important. What do you see that how this person solved this problem in the case study? How can that help you solve this problem that you have right here? And so leading and probing types of questions to drive them deeper into the content will help facilitate learning with mental models. Did I get everything right here? The other thing in learning with mental models that can kind of be a roadblock is that prior knowledge again. So let's say you're teaching in a class and they're still not getting it, and you think you've done everything that you can do to help them get it. I would assess their prior knowledge going into it, because maybe they already have a misconception. I can't get her, obviously not. Okay, a physics teacher uses a series of problems called overload to challenge students to calculate and design a wiring system for a house. How many outlets and circuits are needed? How can these be set up to minimize blowing things up? So in what ways can the teacher guide students to solve the problem here? Let's hear your answers. In what ways can a teacher guide students to determine how many outlets and circuits are needed and how we're not going to blow the place to smithereens? What would be one thing?
You got to have a lab experience.
You got to have a lab experience. Hopefully one with safety goggles.
Well, that's a hands-on project.
A hands-on project.
If we don't.
No. What other ways, though, could you prepare them prior to getting to the lab? Because I think I would want them a little more prepared before I gave them the blow-up stuff.
You could have an electrician come in and give a talk about how they found something at home that seemed to be fine, and yet there was this serious problem that was happening, and they went in and how they solved it for the real world.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Bring an outside expert in. Does anybody else have any other suggestions before we start blowing things up? What should we have our students do? Can you all think of anything else?
Learn the terminology.
Learn the terminology. I would probably use a bunch of diagrams here.
Do it on paper first.
Yeah, do it on paper first. That nobody gets hurt.
Are there apps available that would take them through that process?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, using apps or virtual technology, that sort of thing. That's actually one of our theories at the end. But that true is providing them a model. You know, it's just a model that's, in my opinion, because I work in technology, cooler than a piece of paper. All right, where are we now? I'm running a little ahead of schedule here. Okay, so we've had behaviorism, just doing something, getting feedback, immediate feedback. We've had cognitive kind of thinking about how things are connected. Our third one was inquiry, right? Yeah, inquiry. And then we did, mental models. Okay. Okay, here we go. Now, in my opinion, and I say opinion, but based on what the workforce has told higher ed institutions, learning in groups and having our students able to work and communicate and produce in groups and teams of people in the workforce is huge. Okay, we're not a bunch of siloed individuals. So the fifth type of learning theory is talking about learning in groups and teams. So do your learning outcomes involve changing opinions, attitudes, or creating an awareness of multiple perspectives? I see that a lot in the subjects that I know that you all teach. The multiple perspectives thing is critical. Do students want to deal with feelings or cultivate empathy to build teamwork or collaboration skills? Now, these learning outcomes are best served by learning through groups and teams. Based in human communication and kind of group counseling theory, learning in groups builds on the dynamics in teams, and it is most effective when instructors carefully design, orient, prepare, monitor, and help interpret the learning that occurs within groups. So you can't just stick a whole bunch of people at a table and say, learn this, and step away. You really got to be there, orienting them around the things that are important and kind of guiding them in the direction that you that they need to go in. There are lots to consider when working in groups. How many people have worked with groups in your courses before? It can be a daggone nightmare if you don't really line it out and communicate the expectations to the students in the group, because it is no secret that students do not like group work. They just really don't. Like, I did group work in a class that I teach, and I got rave reviews on my course evaluation, except everybody hated the group work. Now, that's one of those things where you're like, well, we know it's good for you. So, but that means because of that distaste, our preparation ahead of time has to be even better than just throwing it all together. Yes, sir.
I try to get over that by saying this relates to the real world, because you're going to be going to conferences, you're going to be going to training sessions, you're going to break off groups, you're going to come to consensus with your peers from all different walks of life. This is preparing you for the real world. That helps a little bit get over that hump of that.
Yeah. How have you guys used and managed groups in your all's classes, online or in C? Yes, sir.
The facilitator has to teach facilitation, because that's what makes it a group work, and they set up rules about not over talking. Really, groups work if there's a project.
Yeah.
Organizer. To teach how to facilitate.
So how many people use groups in your classes right now as is? All right. So do you all assign roles? Do you let them figure that out, or how far do you take it?
I assign roles. I'll put 3 girls on a horse and have one of them be the recorder of what's going on, the manager of time, and making sure everybody stays in their role. I'll have a therapist, I'll have a vet, I'll have a owner, and a handler, but I'll assign roles.
Yeah.
And then that person is the project manager, like you said, would take the report for the group.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else want to share strategies here? Because we could all use group work strategies, me included.
I found when I use groups, I do a different group in my own campus class. I'll do a different group each week, and we actually draw numbers that are A, B, C, and D, whatever to get. Because what happens is, as we all know, we all congregate for our friends. So you get the same people, and they spin off on one another, where you got it really random. And it doesn't come back on you as instructor saying, no, you go to this group, you go to that. It's really,
Right.
and that works better for me.
That's exactly how I when I was teaching, I told you I was a math teacher, so I had all these really cool shapes. I inherited a room, and I got, I kid you not, a box this big of laminated shapes of all shapes, and they were all about this size and multiple ones. So we drew circles, squares, triangles, and yeah, because number one, I don't want to be responsible for putting you all in a group, because that then can get turned back on me. Well, he didn't like me. You put me with him, and that's a whole other can of worms to begin with. But by randomizing the groups, it seems to work for me too.
What seems to work for me is taking the time to get to know the students in the class and trying to find past knowledge and experience, captains of teams, cheerleader heads, when they're older, who supervises people, who supervises a team, maybe even personality stuff. So a lot of people have their skills, and then just kind of direct them towards a certain group. And, so that those almost always come to the fore and sort of naturally, because most students in groups don't actually ask them. So those students, well, in all other groups, didn't work a lot.
Right.
They'll come to the fore naturally. Yeah. At least one group that should have someone with prior skills.
Right.
So they should really know.
That prior knowledge too, if you get a group full of people that don't have the correct background, that group's not gonna go very far and probably get pretty frustrated. Anybody else have any group work strategies they'd like to share? Because I think these are all very helpful.
I have them elect a spokesperson from the group, and that's driven by me. And sometimes it's someone who's really uncomfortable with that.
Right.
That's okay.
Right, exactly. I agree.
So they get experience with that. But it's driven by them, not by me.
Right. Anybody else have any suggestions for working in groups or teams?
No. My students are learning to write argumentative or persuasive essays. What we'll do to practice thinking about the opposition is I'll divide the room into 4 corners, and I'll call one corner strongly agree, another corner agree, strongly disagree, and disagree. And then I'll put some controversial statement on the board, and I'll say, now go to the corner that represents your stance on the issue. So in that way, they're selecting their own groups. And I said, and don't watch where everybody else is going. That's the first thing they need to do.
Right.
They don't want to be alone. And so that allows them to pick their own groups. And then it also allows them to explore their attitudes and feelings in kind of a safe way, because usually, well, if someone's in a corner all by him or herself, I'll go stand with them, play the devil's advocate.
Right.
But it works that way. And another thing you can do if you want to do random groups, you can either bring in a deck of cards, and then people draw hearts and spades and balls. And then, so that it's not on you.
Right.
You haven't forced them to do it, or that works. Or sometimes I will ask them when their birthdays are, and they group them according to.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
Astrological.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Those are fantastic ideas. I'm seeing a page on our Adjunct faculty site labeled "Good Ideas for Groups." This is really, I think this is a really good idea. This is awesome stuff. Anything else does anybody want to share about a group teaching, group experience that you've had that we may all benefit from? Included. I find groups are high maintenance. They are very high maintenance.
I'm curious, like, I know a lot of you guys talked about roles in groups. For example, you gave some really great examples. Yours are pretty clear cut because you've got actual literal roles that they can play. But for other groups, I wonder what types of group roles you ask your students to assume. Some are easy, like the one gentleman talked about, or kind of a leader of the group, the manager of the group, the secretary of the group, another lady talked about. What other types of roles do you guys think are valuable for your students to assume in a group other than leader and secretary?
maybe a stakeholder, somebody that owns property or somebody that owns an idea or somebody that has a real stake.
Really, one of the things that I like personally to avoid in groups is assigning one person to be the person who makes the graphics, one person to be the person who makes the PowerPoint, one person to be the person who does the writing, because that doesn't usually go that well. I really like your idea of simulating real world roles. I think that's something that can really be taken away for a lot of our classes group work.
Excellent. Yes, sir.
I found out that one, I don't think I've ever seen in the work environment around in the group.
That's pretty funny. All right. You're right. Are there random groups in work environment?
And, they have clear outcomes, produce something or else. And with time constraints, so I think that's important, depending on what class you're doing. Different roles is, I think you have to spell it out depending on what the outcomes are.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, the student project manager, I never really encouraged a person to do that clearly doesn't want to do it because they want to get your way.
Right.
And that's really important. That's really bad. But outline clearly the outcomes, and depending on the level of the student, is they do seem to assign the person, or they volunteer perhaps. It's, I'll do the PowerPoint. I'm good with that. I'll do some research.
Mm-hmm.
I'll edit your stuff, and the assigning of roles. And if we don't do it, then kind of help them. Let's get this done. This stuff. And just one other leader is I responded. If you can find a sergeant, male or female, that's in your own line or class.
They'll just take it to town.
Especially gun sergeant.
How about you, sir?
I've always struggled with
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Okay, so now we've kind of established that roles are good. Okay, how do we hold these people accountable? How do we do that? What have you found that works? Do you have your group members rate other group members?
Fire question out. You see that they're kind of slacking in the group environment
Mm-hmm.
when they're discussing. The one you see who's looking out the window or playing with the phone, fire question out, and that'll snap them out.
Yeah, probably pretty quick.
There's three individuals, one being spokesperson. How do we know the second or third individual is done the three-way equal? And that's a hard term to find at times in group setting. Their share of the work. Well, in Seeds, it's pretty easy. Online, you're right.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that. Stuff. But you can kind of get an idea over time.
And you can think about the different tools that we've got in our online class that we can utilize to record participation. In other words, requiring them to use a Zoom meeting like we're doing here. Well, this Zoom meeting can be recorded, and there'll also be a text transcript of it. So you can see who recorded. Same thing, requiring them to participate in a chat room. Well, the chat room has a text transcript that you can read to see who participated and how they participated. So, it just depends on, maybe there's some technology tools that can help with monitoring.
Yeah, I did. When I used Zoom, each group had their own room. And then so how I knew who was participating is number one, while they were meeting, because they had to tell me when they were meeting, I would pop in there and make sure everybody was there and answering questions. But then after the fact, I can go into Zoom and see who logged in. That's not as convenient as looking at them in your classroom and seeing them stare out the window. So I can't tell you if all 4 people were not staring out the window, even though they were present in the group. But, there is a statute of limitations with our technology, and we have to do the best we can.
The group discussion forum, provide some feedback to the ones you feel are going through the motions.
Right.
Your peer did a great job on this. I'd like you to blah, 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 blah.
I think in the online environment, the Zoom meeting is great for kind of face-to-face and collaborative meeting, but that you can't really control how much they are participating because it's so after the fact, unless you're in their group meeting. But like discussion forum is written words, and it's there whether they're doing it or not. Yes, ma'am.
Well, like in VIX robotics competitions, the teams have to journal everything and it has to be handwritten, and so it can't be copied or taken. You could do that in discussion boards, and each person in the group would have to journal their part of the project.
That's a good idea.
If you see that that two people have journaled that they've done the same job, then you check, well, why did you do this if this person has already done it? And so you could do some checks and balances.
That's true. I can totally see the students' faces when you tell them they have to journal everything that they
Well,
but that gives us what we need, and it holds them accountable.
in jobs, you have no journaling. When you're doing research, you have to journal. You have to write everything that you're doing.
That's right. What would you have? You had your hand raised earlier.
A lot of different ways. I like the idea of a journaling discussion online. We have the technology. We know who's participating, not, in the general class.
Yeah.
And I don't do a whole lot of group work online because so many of the students are so diverse in that job. But on site, I've done everything from the journal to all the way to assigning students that are missing class just in one group to see what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always comes out great.
Yeah, I had students not participate, and then of course the group members are all freaking out because this one person's, what are my grade going to be because this person's not participating? And I didn't want to do this, but I really didn't have a choice at that point. I was like, okay, you aren't participating in your group, so you have to do this whole project by yourself. And it was the most relief they had been all semester. That's what they were waiting for, because they absolutely did not want to work in that group, but whatever.
Of course, not to favor it's also interesting to find out how the people sort of leading the group handle that. Because in work situations, there's always going to be somebody that needs to step up. If someone is not pulling the weight or not doing it fast, so how does the people that are leading the group handle that?
Right.
Which I think is really important. And at the end of the day, it is the project, the outcome. And that's part about being a group. It's,
right.
How does a group handle that? And a lot of times, again, if you have access to the students, they have access to the available.
Yeah, they're not quite in the group. All right, so I think, where are we now? That was good discussion on groups. We don't need to discuss anymore because we just did. Okay, here's our virtual reality. So, do your students need to develop professional judgment within a variety of contexts? And I would say there's a lot of yeses in here. Is this best practice in a safe environment? Again, I'm feeling the yes. Do your students need to gain confidence and competence in complex situations? So I can rest assured that everybody can answer yes to those questions pretty much. These are learning outcomes best served by learning through virtual realities, practicing professional judgment. With roots in psychodrama, sociodrama, and gaming theory, learning through virtual realities can range from simple role play to high-tech simulations. Instructors carefully design or select roles, scenarios, or games that have the most potential. Virtual realities often run themselves, but the instructor, unless you pull off, and get that, your experience, your reflection from that student about the virtual reality, then they're just doing something. They're not learning something. So having a debrief and reflection piece is critical for this type of learning to be effective. They've got to have time to process what they've just experienced or been through in their virtual reality environment, and then critically think and analyze any like the types of problems that you're trying to solve, and that sort of thing. That debrief and that reflection is critical in this learning theory. You know, and games too. I'm sure most of you all have played games in your class to increase, you know, activity and participation. And the game itself isn't the learning experience. You know, it's the reflection that happens afterwards when you think about what you've done, where you can really kind of get that information into your students. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I would like number 6 to be passed on to the president and to deans and so forth as the value of adjuncts.
Yes.
Because this is where our real world experience really pays off.
That's funny that you said that, because right here in my notes I was like, the subject matter expert is critical in this. I mean, I couldn't have a role play or simulation or anything with horses. Like, I'm out. I can look at them. But unless you have somebody who's knowledgeable.
Absolutely. In every case,
Yeah.
The adjuncts are so highly valuable in relating and relaying and being able to bring up real world situations.
I agree. I mean, that's pretty like, I just got instructional toolbox.
I use a lot of simulation games.
You do?
Yeah, not here, but now at the university. But they are very instructive because the students are so interactive.
Right.
Themselves and then try to solve that. For example, I don't know if you hear about this, the Everest. You go to the top of mountain.
Yeah.
Then there is a simulation game that every student should be involved. And then there is a goal that they need to get it, and then go to the summit of the mountain. But each one have a different goals, and then they need to interact with each other. But those simulation games give the students that critical thinking to work on that.
Right. Yeah, I like it, and it's safe. They're not actually climbing down. No liability for you. So yeah, critical the simulations and the subject matter expertise that you all bring to the table is kind of what makes number 6 roll. 100%. I agree. Okay, we're good there. So experiential learning. It's our last one, and we're going to have a little break before our next session. So, do your students need to get immersed in real-life work, service, or travel? Do your learning goals involve reflecting on and making meaning out of such an experience? These learning outcomes are best served by experiential learning. Experiential learning has its own theory base, but it's informed by cognitive neuroscience. That shows learning is natural, it's a multi-sensory process, and it emerges out of experiences. The clinicals, I think, are a great experience here. You and your horses, travel, all of those are experiential learning experiences or environments. It's to use this way of learning effectively, instructors may need to match students to their experience. So knowing your learner here would be critical, or you're going to send them into an experience that's an absolute miserable time. And that's, no learning is going to occur there. If anything, it will be hatred towards any learning at all. It's for. But the other thing, so match your students. You've got to know your student and know what their goals are, and match their goals with the student learning outcome goals from your experiential service. The other thing about experiential learning is they can't just experience it. After they experience it, they need to reflect upon that experience, and then they need to apply that experience to a new experience. Again, we're almost connecting prior knowledge or something they've already known. So their experience that they have had, you need to connect it to an experience later so that they get the full circle of learning from those. My notes here says experience, reflect, and apply. So you have your experience, you have the students reflect, and then you have the students apply what they learned from their experience to a novel situation. Are there any questions or anything you want to share about experiential learning? I think they're the funnest ones to be a learner in my opinion.
Well, I think everybody has a combination of seven ways to teach, because nobody's focused just on one.
Right, you are absolutely right.
Everybody has different ways to teach, and maybe somebody kind of like games and teamwork, how to do teaching.
Yeah, these and these aren't to be silos necessarily, silo strategies. But what it does do is if you look at what your student learning outcome is, and you say, okay, they need to know this process. Oh yeah, that theory was this, and I can, most effectively guide them this way. Well, I gotta make sure I give them feedback. But then once they have that process down, they may need to apply it in an experience. So now you're transferring over to a different type of learning theory. So learning theories and learning experiences aren't mono-e-mono. No, they're kind of all blended up like vegetable soup. You're absolutely correct. Does anybody else have any questions? Anybody online have any questions?
We don't have any questions in the chat.
Okay, all right.
I just think in the little handout that you sent last when we did that for the night, I thought that last paragraph there on the last page, and that page number there, but when they talked about teaching was meant to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, from a standpoint of teaching, the more you can do things that you're comfortable with too, within the people. I mean, I know you have to spread out there things, but you ought to enjoy the experience.
I agree. And I generally speaking learn a lot from my students. The older I get, I learn more and more because I keep in tune with that generation. All right, thank you all for just listening to me chat about theory. I love it. I can read it all day. So we have a break until 10:30, and that's when our information people will be coming in. Feel free to roam around, check out the new books.
One more question.
Yeah.
When we started to compile, can we introduce each other? Because I don't know.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll start over here. I should have done that at the beginning. Let's introduce ourselves.
My name is Tim Little. I teach the Urban Studies curriculum, which is part of tourism and heritage.
Linda Elbridge, I teach the CIS area.
Living Clement, I teach history.
Oh, Carlos Linares, I teach strategies and English courses.
Okay.
Colonel
Colonel Testing.
Mike Mueller, this MBA program economics.
Digital learning and statistics.
The entire geography. Everybody, let's congratulate Anne. She just defended her dissertation 2 weeks ago.